I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Deborah Ventura standing on my front porch in December, with that familiar pinched expression on her face. She was the HOA president of Pinewood Ridge, our gated community in Bend, Oregon, and every time she showed up unannounced, it meant trouble for someone. I opened the door halfway, keeping the cold air out. "Can I help you, Deborah?" She didn't wait for an invitation, just started talking in that clipped tone she used when she thought she had authority over you. "Jacob, I need to discuss something important with you. The HOA board has been receiving complaints about your firewood deliveries." I blinked at her. "Complaints? About firewood?" "Yes. Mrs. Patterson says the delivery trucks are blocking the street for extended periods, and Mr. Chen mentioned that your stockpile is becoming an eyesore." She shifted her designer purse from one arm to the other. "But that's not why I'm here. The board has decided that since you're clearly ordering more wood than one household needs, you should share it with the other residents who might need it." For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. "You want me to share my firewood?" "It's about community spirit, Jacob. We're all neighbors here. Some of our elderly residents are struggling with heating costs, and you have all that wood just sitting there." She gestured toward my side yard where I kept my neatly stacked cords of firewood under a tarp. "The board thinks it would be in the best interest of the community if you donated, say, half of your supply to those in need." I felt my jaw clench. "Deborah, I paid for that wood, with my own money. I ordered it specifically because I heat my entire house with my wood stove. That's not extra wood. That's what I need to get through winter. Now, Jacob, let's not be selfish about this." Her voice took on that patronizing tone I'd heard her use at HOA meetings. "You're a young, healthy man with a good job. Surely you can afford to order more if you need it. Mrs. Henderson is on a fixed income. Don't you think she deserves to be warm too? Then maybe the HOA should buy wood for Mrs. Henderson instead of demanding I give away what I paid for." I kept my voice level, but I could feel my blood pressure rising. Deborah's eyes narrowed. "The HOA board has already voted on this. According to Section 7.3 of our community guidelines, residents are expected to contribute to the common welfare when they have resources to spare." I knew our HOA guidelines pretty well. I'd read them front to back before buying my house 3 years ago. Section 7.3 talks about volunteering for community events and not creating disturbances that affect other residents. It says nothing about forcing anyone to give away their personal property. "We interpret it as covering situations like this," she said firmly. "I'll expect you to make at least 3 cords available by the end of the week. We'll have volunteers come by to collect it and distribute it to those who need it." "No." The word hung in the cold air between us. Deborah's face flushed red. "Excuse me," I said. "No. You're not taking my firewood. I bought it, I'm using it, and there's no rule that says I have to give it away." I started to close the door. "Have a good day, Deborah." She stuck her foot in the doorway. "This isn't over, Jacob. The board will be hearing about your uncooperative attitude." "I'm sure they will." I waited until she moved her foot, then closed the door. Through the window, I watched her march back to her silver Lexus, her phone already pressed to her ear. I knew I'd just made an enemy, but I wasn't about to let the HOA bully me into giving away several $100s worth of firewood just because they thought they could. The next morning, I found a formal notice taped to my front door. It was printed on HOA letterhead and cited me for violation of community welfare standards and failure to comply with board directives. The fine was $500, payable within 10 days. I took a photo of the notice and immediately called my lawyer, Marcus Young. We'd gone to college together and he specialized in property law and HOA disputes. They're fining you for not giving them your firewood, Marcus repeated after I explained the situation. That's insane. Can they do that? No, absolutely not. The HOA has no legal right to confiscate or demand personal property from residents. This fine is completely unenforceable. Papers rustled in the background. But I know Deborah Ventura's type. She's not going to back down just because she's wrong. Forward me everything, the notice, your HOA guidelines, any emails or documentation of conversations you've had with her. Will do. What should I expect? Probably escalation. These people always double down when someone stands up to them. Don't pay the fine, don't give them the wood, and document everything. Save every email, record conversations if Oregon's a one-party consent state, which it is, and keep detailed notes. I thanked him and hung up, then spent the next hour documenting everything that had happened. I also set up my doorbell camera to record in higher quality and positioned my phone to record if Deborah showed up again. She didn't come back that day. Instead, I got an email from the HOA secretary, Linda Morrison, stating that my case would be discussed at the next board meeting in 3 days. The email strongly suggested I attend to explain my position and hopefully reach an amicable solution. The board meeting was held at the community clubhouse on Thursday evening. I arrived 15 minutes early and found about 30 residents already there, which was unusual. Normally, these meetings drew maybe 10 people at most. Deborah sat at the head table with the other 4 board members: Richard Paulson, the vice president, Linda Morrison, Tom Bradley, the treasurer, and Susan Chen, despite the fact that her husband had supposedly complained about my wood deliveries. I wondered if that had been true or if Deborah had made it up. "Good evening, everyone," Deborah called the meeting to order with a sharp tap of her gavel. "We have several items on tonight's agenda, but first I want to address an ongoing situation involving one of our residents." She proceeded to paint a picture of me as a selfish hoarder who refused to help elderly neighbors in need. She conveniently left out the part where she was demanding I give away my personal property, or the fact that I needed that wood to heat my home. "Mr. Xavier has been uncooperative and hostile when approached about this matter," Deborah continued. "His attitude reflects poorly on our community values." I raised my hand. "I'd like to respond to that." Deborah looked annoyed. "This isn't the public comment portion of the meeting yet." "Actually," Richard Paulson interjected quietly, "if we're discussing a specific resident, they should have the opportunity to speak." Deborah's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Fine, keep it brief." I stood up so everyone could see me. Everything Deborah just said is misleading at best. She came to my house and demanded I give away half of my firewood supply, which amounts to several $100s worth of property that I purchased for my own use. I heat my entire home with a wood stove. I'm not hoarding anything. I'm preparing for winter, just like anyone would who relies on wood heat. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several people were nodding. "Furthermore," I continued, "the HOA has no legal authority to confiscate or demand personal property from residents. The fine I received is unenforceable. If there are elderly residents who need help with heating costs, that's a community issue we should address together, but forcing one person to shoulder that burden by giving away their property is not the solution." "The board has already made its decision," Deborah snapped. "This is not up for debate." "Actually, it is," a voice said from the back. An older man I recognized as George Henderson, the husband of the woman Deborah had mentioned, stood up. "My wife and I don't want Jacob's firewood. We never asked for it. We have gas heat and we're managing just fine." "I don't know where you got the idea we needed help, Deborah, but you didn't ask us." Deborah's face went pale, then flushed deep red. Well, I'm sure there are others who could benefit. Then let them buy their own wood or set up a community fund to help them, George said firmly. Don't steal from Jacob to make yourself look like some kind of hero. The meeting devolved into chaos after that. Residents started arguing with each other about HOA overreach, community responsibility, and whether Deborah had too much power. The board members looked increasingly uncomfortable, except for Deborah, who kept trying to regain control by banging her gavel and calling for order. Finally, Richard Paulson suggested they table the discussion until the next meeting and let cooler heads prevail. The motion passed 3-2, with Deborah and Linda voting against it. As people filed out, several residents came up to me privately to express support. A few told me stories about their own run-ins with Deborah and her heavy-handed tactics. She's been getting worse over the past year, one woman named Patricia told me. She tried to fine my son for parking his work van in our driveway overnight, said it was commercial vehicle and violated the aesthetics clause. He's a plumber. He needs his van. I drove home feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe public pressure would force Deborah to back down. I should have known better. The next morning, I woke up to find that someone had scattered my firewood all over my front yard during the night. Logs were strewn across the grass, the tarp was torn, and someone had spray-painted "Share" in large red letters on my garage door. I immediately called the police. Officer Jennifer Hayes arrived within 20 minutes and took a full report, including photos of the damage. I showed her the doorbell camera footage, but whoever had done this had worn dark clothing and a ski mask. The video wasn't clear enough to identify them. Any idea who might have done this? Officer Hayes asked. I'm having a dispute with my HOA president. I explained the situation. I'm not saying she did it personally, but the timing is suspicious. I'll include that in the report. You might want to consider additional security cameras and keep documenting everything. If this escalates, you'll want evidence. After she left, I spent 3 hours restacking my firewood. My shoulders and back ached by the time I finished, and I was seething with anger. I took dozens of photos before I cleaned up, then emailed them to Marcus along with the police report number. His response was immediate. This is criminal vandalism. File an insurance claim and save everything. We're building a case. That afternoon, I received a smug email from Deborah stating that the HOA board had received reports of unsecured firewood creating a safety hazard, and I was being fined another $300 for improper storage of materials. I called Marcus again. Can she just keep making up fines? She can try, but none of them will hold up legally. What she's doing is harassment at this point. I think it's time we sent the HOA a formal cease and desist letter. Do it. Marcus drafted a letter that afternoon outlining the HOA's violations and demanding they stop harassing me, cancel the fines, and cease any further attempts to confiscate my property. He sent it via certified mail and email to ensure they received it. For a few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It happened on Monday. I had a standing order with Cascade Wood Supply, a local company that delivered firewood. They brought me 2 cords every 6 weeks during winter, which was exactly what I needed to keep up with my usage. I'd arranged for a delivery that afternoon. At 3 p.m. I got a call from the owner, Dave Ramos. Hey Jacob, I've got a problem. I'm sitting outside your community gate and the HOA president is here. She's saying I'm not allowed to deliver to you. What? She can't do that. Well, she's standing in front of my truck and says she'll have it towed if I try to enter. She's got some paper saying wood deliveries to your address are prohibited due to ongoing violations. I grabbed my keys. Stay there. I'm coming down. The gate was only a quarter-mile from my house. When I arrived, I found Dave's truck idling at the entrance while Deborah stood in front of it with her arms crossed. Two other HOA board members, Linda and Tom, flanked her. A tow truck was parked nearby. I pulled up and got out of my car. "Deborah, what are you doing?" "Enforcing HOA regulations," she said coldly. "You've been cited for multiple violations. Until those are resolved, you're prohibited from receiving wood deliveries. You can't block a delivery to my private property. That's not how any of this works. The roads in this community are maintained by the HOA. We have the right to control what vehicles use them." She held up a printed document. "This is a temporary restriction issued by the board this morning." Dave leaned out of his truck window. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I've got other deliveries to make." "You're not in trouble, Dave," I assured him. "Deborah is. She's interfering with commerce and blocking access to private property." "That's ridiculous," Deborah scoffed. "I'm doing no such thing." I pulled out my phone and called Officer Hayes. She'd given me her direct number after the vandalism incident. When she answered, I explained the situation. "Put me on speaker," she said. I held up the phone. "You're on speaker with everyone here. This is Officer Hayes with the Bend Police Department." "Madam, are you preventing a commercial delivery vehicle from accessing a resident's property?" Deborah hesitated. "I'm enforcing HOA regulations. That doesn't give you the right to block public commerce or access to private property. The roads in your community may be maintained by the HOA, but they're not private roads in the legal sense if they provide sole access to residents' homes. You need to step aside and let the delivery proceed, or I'll come down there and we can discuss obstruction charges." Deborah's face went through several shades of red and purple. Finally, she stepped aside. "This isn't over." "I'm sure it's not," I muttered. Dave delivered the wood without further incident, though he told me he'd probably need to charge a surcharge for future deliveries given the hassle. I couldn't blame him. That evening I got a call from Marcus. "I heard about what happened today. Jacob, this is getting out of hand. Deborah Ventura is exposing the HOA to serious liability. I think you need to consider filing a formal lawsuit." "For what?" "Harassment, illegal fines, interference with property rights, attempting to deprive you of necessary resources. Take your pick. What she's doing isn't just annoying. It's illegal and it's creating a hostile living environment." I thought about it. I didn't want to be that guy who sued his HOA, but Deborah clearly wasn't going to stop. "Let me think about it." "Don't think too long. And in the meantime, I suggest you document your wood usage. Keep receipts, take photos of your wood pile regularly, show that you're using what you buy. If this goes to court, we want to prove you're not hoarding or being wasteful." I spent the next few days doing exactly that. I photographed my wood pile from multiple angles, documented how many logs I burned each day, and kept detailed records of my heating costs compared to gas heat. The numbers were clear. Heating with wood saved me about 60% compared to the gas furnace, which was why I'd invested in the wood stove in the first place. The HOA's next move came via email. They'd scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss ongoing community disruptions caused by my deliveries and failure to comply with board directives. The meeting was mandatory for me to attend, and failure to appear would result in additional fines. Marcus told me not to go. "It's a kangaroo court. They're going to use anything you say against you. Send them a letter stating you decline to attend without legal representation present, and that you don't recognize the legitimacy of any fines they've issued." I did as he advised. The response was swift and predictable. A $5,000 fine for failure to appear at mandatory board meeting, and a warning that continued non-compliance could result in a lien being placed on my property. "They're bluffing," Marcus assured me when I forwarded him the notice. "They can't place a lien for made-up violations, but this is good for our case. They're digging themselves deeper." "How long are we going to let this go on?" "Not much longer. I'm finishing up the lawsuit paperwork. We'll file by the end of the week." But before we could file, the situation took a dangerous turn. I came home from work on Wednesday to find my side gate open and my woodpile disturbed. At first, I thought it was another vandalism incident, but then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Several logs had been moved away from the main pile, and there were fresh scratches on my wood stove's exterior vent pipe where someone had tried to disconnect it. Someone had tried to sabotage my heating system. I immediately called the police and Marcus. Officer Hayes came back out with another officer, Detective Mike Torres. They examined the vent pipe and confirmed that someone had attempted to loosen the connections. "If they'd succeeded, carbon monoxide could have leaked into your house," Detective Torres said grimly. "This isn't vandalism anymore. This is attempted reckless endangerment." "Do you have any camera coverage of this area?" Officer Hayes asked. "No, just the front door." "I'll install more cameras today." They took statements and photographs, and Detective Torres said they'd be opening a formal investigation. "Given your ongoing dispute with the HOA, we'll be talking to Miss Ventura and the board members. Do you know anyone else who might want to harm you?" "No." "This whole thing is about Firewood. It's insane." After the police left, I called my parents in Seattle to let them know what was happening. My dad was furious. "You need to get out of there. Come stay with us until this is resolved." "I'm not leaving my home because some power-hungry HOA president is having a meltdown. I'm putting in more cameras, changing my locks, and I'm not backing down." My mom worried, but she understood. "Just be careful, honey. People do crazy things when they feel like they're losing control." I spent that evening installing 3 additional security cameras covering my side yard, back door, and garage. I also had a security company install motion sensor lights around the entire perimeter of my property. The next day, Detective Torres called. We spoke with Miss Ventura. She denied any involvement and seemed genuinely shocked when we told her what happened. She did mention that several residents have been upset about your refusal to share firewood, but she wouldn't give us names. You believe her? Hard to say. She's either telling the truth or she's a good actress. We're going to review HOA meeting minutes and see if we can identify anyone who might have taken this into their own hands. In the meantime, keep those cameras running and call us if anything else happens. That evening, I received an unexpected visit from Richard Paulson, the HOA vice president. Unlike Deborah's confrontational appearances, Richard seemed genuinely concerned. "Jacob, can we talk?" he asked when I opened the door. I invited him incautiously. He sat down in my living room and looked uncomfortable. "I need to apologize," he started. "The board, myself included, we've let Deborah run roughshod over this community for too long. This situation with your firewood, it's gotten completely out of hand." I voted to table the discussion at that first meeting, but I should have stood up to her more forcefully. "Why didn't you?" he sighed. "Because it's easier to go along than to fight. Deborah's been HOA president for 6 years. She's very good at making life miserable for anyone who opposes her. But after what happened to your heating system, I can't stay silent anymore. That could have killed you." "Do you think Deborah did it?" "Honestly, no. She's controlling and unreasonable, but I don't think she's violent. But I think her crusade against you may have inspired someone else to take action. She's been very vocal at meetings and on the community Facebook page about your selfishness. Some people take that kind of rhetoric too seriously. So what are you going to do about it? I'm calling for a vote of no confidence at the next board meeting. Tom and Susan have agreed to support it. If we can get Deborah removed as president, maybe we can start undoing some of the damage. It was a start, but I wasn't holding my breath. What about all the bogus fines? Those will be voided. I've already spoken to our HOA attorney, and she confirmed that none of them are legally valid. We were never going to be able to enforce them anyway. After Richard left, I felt marginally better. At least not everyone in the HOA had lost their minds. But I still wanted justice for what had been done to me. Marcus filed the lawsuit on Friday. We were suing the HOA for harassment, illegal fines, defamation, and creating a hostile living environment. We were also naming Deborah Ventura personally for her role in the harassment. The lawsuit made local news. Man sues HOA after being pressured to share firewood ran as a headline in the Bend Bulletin. The story painted the HOA in an extremely unfavorable light, especially after mentioning the attempted sabotage of my heating system. My phone started ringing with interview requests. I declined most of them, but I did agree to speak with a reporter from Oregon Public Broadcasting who was doing a larger piece on HOA overreach. This isn't just about firewood, I told her during the interview. It's about an HOA president who thinks she has unlimited authority over residents' private property and personal lives. When I refused to comply with her illegal demands, she escalated the situation to the point where someone tried to sabotage my heating system in the middle of winter. That's not how communities are supposed to function. The interview aired on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, I had emails and messages from dozens of people sharing their own HOA horror stories. It was eye-opening and depressing in equal measure. The special board meeting to vote on Deborah's future was scheduled for Tuesday evening. Marcus advised me to attend. This is your chance to see if the board is serious about making changes, he said. If they remove Deborah and commit to voiding the fines, we might be able to settle the lawsuit without going to court, but I want to see action first. The clubhouse was packed for the meeting. Every seat was taken and people lined the walls. The local news had sent a camera crew. Deborah sat at the head table looking defiant, but I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Richard Paulson opened the meeting. Tonight we're here to discuss a motion of no confidence in our current HOA president, Deborah Ventura. Before we vote, I want to lay out the reasons for this motion. He proceeded to detail every illegal and unethical action Deborah had taken regarding my firewood situation, including attempting to confiscate personal property, issuing illegal fines, blocking commercial deliveries, and creating an environment that may have led to criminal activity against a resident. Furthermore, Richard continued, I've discovered that Miss Ventura has been issuing fines and citations without full board approval, which violates our own bylaws. She's been operating as if she's a dictator rather than a president elected to serve this community. Deborah stood up abruptly. This is a witch hunt. I've dedicated 6 years to this community, and this is how you repay me. By believing the lies of one selfish resident who won't help his neighbors. This isn't about Jacob Xavier, Susan Chen said firmly. This is about you abusing your position. My husband never complained about wood deliveries. You made that up to support your narrative. You lied to the board and to the community. The color drained from Deborah's face. I didn't lie. I interpreted his concerns about truck noise as being related to the deliveries. He mentioned leaf blowers, Deborah, not delivery trucks. You twisted his words to serve your agenda. The meeting devolved into heated arguments. Residents stood up to share their own experiences with Deborah's overreach. The stories were remarkably similar. Heavy-handed enforcement of minor or non-existent violations, personal vendettas against anyone who disagreed with her, and a general attitude that she knew better than everyone else. Finally, Richard called for the vote. All in favor of removing Deborah Ventura as HOA president? 4 hands went up: Richard, Tom, Susan, and Linda. Linda's vote surprised me. She'd seemed like Deborah's ally. The motion passes. Deborah, you're no longer HOA president. We'll hold elections for a new president next month. Deborah grabbed her purse and stormed out of the clubhouse without another word. The room erupted in applause. Richard waited for the noise to die down. We have a lot of work to do to repair this community and restore trust. First order of business. All fines issued to Xavier are hereby voided. Second, we'll be reviewing all citations issued in the past year to ensure they were legitimate and issued with proper board approval. Third, we're going to revise our bylaws to include better checks and balances so no single board member can wield this much unchecked power again. It was a good start, but I wasn't ready to drop the lawsuit yet. Too much had happened and someone had still tried to sabotage my heating system. The answer to that mystery came 3 days later. Detective Torres called me at work. We've made an arrest in connection with the attempted sabotage of your heating system. Who was it? A woman named Patricia Klein. She lives 4 houses down from you. Ring any bells? I remembered Patricia. She was the woman at the meeting who told me about her son's work van being targeted by Deborah. Yeah, I know her. Why would she do this? According to her statement, she was trying to help you. She thought that if your heating system broke, you'd be forced to use more firewood, which would prove to the HOA that you actually needed all the wood you'd purchased. She didn't realize that disconnecting the vent pipe could cause carbon monoxide poisoning. She claims she was just trying to make it stop working temporarily. I sat down heavily. That's insane. She's being charged with reckless endangerment and criminal mischief. She'll likely get probation and community service given her intent and the fact that no actual harm occurred, but it's going on her record. What about the vandalism? The spray paint and scattered firewood? She confessed to that too. Same misguided logic. She thought if she made it look like the firewood was causing problems, the HOA would leave you alone. After we hung up, I just sat there processing it. Patricia had seemed so reasonable, so supportive. But Deborah's rhetoric had twisted her thinking to the point where she committed crimes thinking she was helping me. That's when I realized how dangerous the whole situation had become. Deborah hadn't just harassed me. She'd created an environment where people felt justified taking illegal action based on her manufactured crisis. I called Marcus. I want to move forward with the lawsuit, but I want to add something. I want the court to require HOA reform and oversight. This can't happen to someone else. That's a tall order, but given everything that's happened, I think we can make a case for it. The lawsuit moved forward. The HOA's attorney tried to settle several times, offering to pay my legal fees and make a formal apology, but we wanted more than that. We wanted structural changes. 3 months later, we reached a settlement. The HOA would pay $50,000 in damages, $15,000 in legal fees, and would be required to implement a series of reforms, including mandatory HOA board training, a resident ombudsman position to handle complaints, and a requirement that all fines be approved by majority board vote with clear documentation of the violation. Additionally, Deborah Ventura was permanently banned from serving in any HOA leadership position in Pinewood Ridge. If she violated this ban, she would be personally liable for damages. The settlement was approved by a judge and became part of the public record. It made news again. this time as a cautionary tale about HOA overreach and the importance of proper oversight. Patricia Klein pleaded guilty to reckless endangerment and received 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling. She wrote me a long apology letter that I read but couldn't bring myself to respond to. Her intentions might have been good in her mind, but she'd still put my life at risk. Deborah Ventura sold her house and moved out of Pinewood Ridge in April. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved to Arizona. I hoped for the sake of her new neighbors that she'd learned something from all this, but I doubted it. Richard Paulson was elected as the new HOA president in a landslide. One of his first acts was to establish a community fund to help residents who struggled with heating costs. Several of us, including me, contributed. It was the right way to handle the issue, community members helping each other voluntarily, not through forced confiscation of property. The following winter, I ordered my usual Firewood deliveries without any interference. Dave from Cascade Wood Supply told me the HOA had actually reached out to offer his company preferred vendor status, which meant he could advertise his services to all residents and get more business in the area. One evening in late December, almost exactly a year after this whole mess started, I was sitting in my living room enjoying the warmth from my wood stove when someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find George Henderson, the elderly man who defended me at that first chaotic board meeting. "Hope I'm not bothering you, Jacob," he said. "My wife and I wanted to give you this." He handed me a plate covered in aluminum foil. I lifted the edge and saw homemade cookies. "It's just a small thank you," George continued, "for standing up to Deborah and for helping with the heating fund. My grandson lives 2 streets over, and he's been having a tough time financially. That fund helped him get through last month when his furnace broke. So thank you." After George left, I sat back down in front of the wood stove and ate one of the cookies. It was good chocolate chip with walnuts. I thought about everything that had happened over the past year, the harassment, the vandalism, the attempted sabotage, the lawsuit, all because I'd refused to give away my firewood. But I'd also seen the community come together in the end. Good people had stood up against bullying and overreach. Real reforms had been put in place. And now there was a system to actually help people who needed it, not through forced redistribution, but through voluntary community support. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Saw that Oregon Public Broadcasting piece won a regional journalism award. You're famous now." I smiled and typed back, "I just wanted to keep my firewood." "And you did. That's the American dream right there." I looked at my neatly stacked woodpile visible through the window, covered with a new tarp and completely secure. In the morning, I'd bring in more logs to feed the stove. I'd continue heating my home the way I'd chosen to, efficiently and affordably, with wood I'd paid for with my own money. The next day was Saturday, and I decided to tackle a project I'd been putting off. The spray paint on my garage door had never quite come off completely despite my best efforts. I'd been meaning to repaint it, and the winter sun was actually cooperating for once. I was at the hardware store picking up paint when I ran into Susan Chen. She was shopping for light fixtures and greeted me warmly. "Jacob, how are you? We haven't seen you at any board meetings lately." "I've been busy," I said diplomatically. The truth was I had zero interest in attending HOA meetings anymore. I'd had enough of HOA drama to last a lifetime. "I understand, but I wanted you to know things are really different now. Richard's doing a great job and we've been making a lot of positive changes. Last month we voted to reduce HOA fees by 15% because we cut out some unnecessary expenses." "That's great. And we're planning a community barbecue in the spring. Real casual, just neighbors getting together. I hope you'll come." I promised I'd think about it, paid for my paint, and headed home. The truth was, I was still processing everything that had happened. It would take time to feel comfortable at community events again. When I got home, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked in front of my house. A man in his 30s got out as I pulled into my driveway. Xavier, he called out. I approached cautiously. Yes, my name's David Reeves. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've been following your story, and I'd love to talk to you about potentially being part of a documentary about HOA conflicts in America. I almost laughed. You're kidding. I'm completely serious. HOA disputes are becoming a major issue across the country, but they don't get much attention. Your case is perfect because it shows how quickly things can escalate and how existing oversight mechanisms often fail. I thought about it for a moment. Look, I appreciate the interest, but I'm trying to move on from all this. I just want to live my life without drama. David nodded understandingly. I get it. But think about it. Your story could help other people who are dealing with similar situations. It could push for legislative reform. Here's my card. If you change your mind, give me a call. I took the card and watched him drive away. Part of me was tempted. If telling my story could help prevent someone else from going through what I'd experienced, maybe it would be worth it. But another part of me was exhausted by the whole thing and just wanted it to fade into the past. I spent the afternoon repainting my garage door. The physical work was satisfying, and watching the spray paint disappear under fresh coats of paint felt symbolic. I was literally covering up the evidence of that difficult time. As I worked, my neighbor from across the street, a guy named Frank Miller, walked over with a beer in hand. New paint looks good, he said. Thanks. Should have done this months ago. Frank took a sip of his beer. You know, I never told you this, but I really respected how you handled everything with Deborah. A lot of guys would have just given her the wood to avoid the hassle. It wasn't about the wood, I said, dipping my roller in the paint tray. It was about the principle. You can't let people bully you into giving up your rights just because they have a title. Exactly. And honestly, Deborah needed to be knocked down a few pegs. She'd been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. He paused. My wife wanted to invite you over for dinner sometime. Nothing fancy, just burgers on the grill. We've lived across the street from you for 3 years and barely know you. I realized he was right. I'd been so focused on work and maintaining my house that I hadn't really connected with my neighbors. The whole Firewood situation had forced interactions, but not the good kind. I'd like that, I said. Let me know when. After Frank left, I finished the painting and stood back to admire my work. The garage door looked brand new. It was amazing what a fresh coat of paint could do. That evening, I got an unexpected email from Deborah Ventura. The subject line read, "Apology." I hesitated before opening it. Part of me wanted to just delete it, but curiosity won out. The email was long and rambling. She talked about the stress of being HOA president, the pressure she felt to solve problems, and how she'd convinced herself that my Firewood situation was a problem that needed solving. She admitted that she'd been wrong to push so hard and that she should have respected my property rights. She claimed she'd been seeing a therapist since moving to Arizona and was working on her need to control situations. But then the email took a turn. In the last paragraph, she wrote, "That said, I still think you could have been more generous. Yes, it was your wood, but sometimes being a good neighbor means making sacrifices. I went about it the wrong way, but my heart was in the right place." I closed the email without responding. Even in her apology, Deborah couldn't fully accept that she'd been wrong. She still thought she'd been justified, just poorly executed. Some people never change. Winter continued on, cold and snowy. My wood stove kept my house toasty warm, and I went through firewood at the rate I'd always expected to. Every time I loaded logs into the stove, I thought about how close I'd come to losing this simple comfort because of one woman's power trip. In February, I got a call from Richard Paulson. "Jacob, I hate to bother you, but we've had a situation come up that I wanted to make you aware of." My stomach dropped. "What kind of situation?" "Nothing involving you directly," he assured me quickly. "But Deborah's been posting on social media about her time here and about you. She's twisting the story, making herself out to be a victim who was trying to help the community and got sued for it. Some HOA advocacy groups have picked up her narrative." "Are you serious?" "Unfortunately, yes. Our attorney says there's not much we can do unless she says something clearly defamatory. Right now, she's just presenting a very one-sided version of events." I felt anger rising in my chest. "She hasn't learned anything." "No, she hasn't. I'm sorry to bring this to you. I just thought you should know in case anyone contacts you about it." After we hung up, I did something I'd been avoiding. I searched for Deborah Ventura on social media. Sure enough, I found her Facebook posts. She'd written a long manifesto about standing up for community values and being persecuted by a selfish homeowner who sued rather than share. She'd left out every inconvenient detail: the illegal fines, the blocking of deliveries, the vandalism that her rhetoric had inspired, Patricia's attempt to sabotage my heating system. The comments on her posts were mixed. Some people supported her, buying into her victim narrative. But others called her out, pointing to news articles about the case that told the full story. A few people even shared their own nightmare experiences with Deborah before she'd moved. I was tempted to respond, to set the record straight. But Marcus had taught me better. "Never engage with crazy on social media," he'd said. "It never ends well, and you can't win an argument with someone who's willing to lie." So I closed the browser and let it go. People who wanted the truth could find it. The court records were public. The news articles were archived. Deborah's social media rants would fade away eventually. In March, spring started to arrive in Bend. The snow melted, the days got longer, and I could finally ease up on burning firewood. I still had about half a cord left, which was perfect. It would last me through the occasional cold night and into next fall. The community barbecue Susan Chen had mentioned was scheduled for the first Saturday in April. I debated whether to go, but ultimately decided I should. If I was going to continue living in Pinewood Ridge, I needed to be part of the community, not isolated in my house nursing old grievances. The barbecue was held at the community park, a pleasant space with picnic tables, a playground, and a large pavilion. When I arrived, there were already about 50 people there, grilling, playing games, and socializing. Richard spotted me and waved me over. "Jacob, glad you made it. Can I get you a burger?" "Sure, thanks." As I waited for the food, several neighbors came up to talk to me. Most of them were friendly, thanking me for standing up to Deborah or sharing their relief that the HOA was functioning better now. A few were more reserved, perhaps uncomfortable with all the conflict that had happened. One woman I didn't recognize approached me hesitantly. "Are you Jacob Xavier?" "That's me. I'm Denise Foster. I just moved into the community last month. I heard about everything that happened with the previous HOA president." She lowered her voice. "Can I ask you something? Do you feel safe here now?" It was a good question, one I'd asked myself many times. "Yeah, I do." It took time and there were some scary moments. But the community dealt with the problem. The bad actor is gone, reforms are in place, and life has moved on. That's good to hear. When I was doing research before buying my house, I found all the news articles and got worried. "But everyone I've met seems really nice." "Most people are," I said. The problem with HOAs is they give a small group of people power over a large group, and sometimes the wrong person ends up in charge. But when the community actually pays attention and holds leaders accountable, the system can work. We talked for a while longer, and I found myself actually enjoying the conversation. As the afternoon went on, I relaxed and started to feel like I was part of something good, a real community, not just a collection of houses governed by arbitrary rules. Frank Miller and his wife Gina invited me to join their table for dinner. We ate burgers and talked about normal neighborhood stuff, upcoming road repairs, the new family moving in down the street, plans for summer gardening. It was wonderfully mundane. As the sun started to set and the barbecue wound down, Richard called for everyone's attention. Before we wrap up, I just want to say how great it is to see everyone here. This is what Pinewood Ridge should be, neighbors coming together, supporting each other, enjoying each other's company. We went through a rough patch, but we came out stronger. Thanks to everyone who's helped make this community better. People clapped, and I found myself clapping too. We had come through a rough patch, and while I'd never forget what happened, I could move forward. Over the following months, life in Pinewood Ridge returned to a comfortable normalcy. The HOA board made good decisions, residents felt heard, and the community fund helped several families with various needs, not just heating costs. One family got help with medical bills after a car accident. Another got support when a breadwinner lost their job. I even ended up volunteering for the fund's oversight committee. Marcus had raised his eyebrows when I told him, "You sure you want to get involved with HOA stuff again? It's different now. This is actually helping people the right way through voluntary contributions and community consensus. Besides, I want to make sure it stays legitimate and doesn't turn into another power trip." Summer came and went. My woodpile sat unused under its tarp, waiting for fall. I spent my free time hiking in the nearby mountains, going to Frank and Gina's for barbecues, and generally enjoying life without drama. In September, I ordered my first firewood delivery of the season. Dave from Cascade Wood Supply arrived right on schedule, and this time there was no HOA president blocking the entrance. He stacked the wood in my side yard. We chatted for a few minutes about the upcoming winter weather forecast, and he drove away. I stood looking at my freshly stacked firewood and felt a sense of peace. It was just wood, dried, split logs that would keep me warm through the winter. Nothing more, nothing less. But it represented something important. The principle that people have the right to control their own property and live their lives without unreasonable interference. That evening, I built my first fire of the season. The wood caught easily, flames dancing behind the glass door of the stove. Heat radiated into the room, and I settled into my favorite chair with a book. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. "How's the firewood situation this year? Any HOA drama?" I smiled and typed back. "All quiet on the Western Front. Just enjoying my wood in peace." "That's what I like to hear. You earned it." I set the phone down and went back to my book. Outside, the September evening was cooling down, but inside, my home was warm and comfortable. I'd fought for the right to heat my home the way I wanted, stood up against bullying and illegal actions, and come out the other side intact. The fire crackled softly, logs shifting as they burned. I added another piece of wood and watched it catch flame. This was what normal looked like. This was what it should have been all along. A man, his home, his wood stove, and the simple pleasure of staying warm in winter. No drama. No harassment. No HOA president demanding I share what I'd paid for with my own money. Just peace, warmth, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd stood my ground and won. As winter settled in over Bend, Oregon, I continued my routine. Work during the day, wood stove in the evening, and an increasingly active social life with my neighbors. The documentary filmmaker, David Reeves, reached out 2 more times, but I continued to decline. Maybe someday I'd be ready to tell my story on camera, but not yet. The lawsuits were settled. The reforms were in place. The bad actor was gone. And most importantly, I had my firewood, earned through honest work, paid for with my own money, and used to heat my home exactly as I'd intended in the end. That's all I'd ever wanted. The HOA had demanded I share it, then tried to freeze me out when I refused. But I'd cut off their authority over me, stood my ground, and reclaimed my right to live my life on my own terms. And every time I loaded wood into that stove, I was reminded that sometimes the smallest battles are worth fighting, because principles matter more than convenience. Standing up to bullies matters more than keeping the peace. And sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing actually works out in the end. The fire burned warm and bright, and outside my window, snow began to fall. Winter had arrived, and I was ready for it. More than ready. I was comfortable, secure, and at peace in my own home, surrounded by carefully stacked cords of firewood that belonged to me and me alone. That's how this story ends. Not with revenge or continued conflict, but with the quiet satisfaction of a man warming himself by his own fire in his own home, living life on his own terms, exactly as it should be.